Hello, everybody. This is Coresair Mack, President of the Illinois Mental Health Counselors Association, and today I am joined by our very own special guest, Dr. Nathaniel Gilham. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I am doing well. For a cold Tuesday in January, the last day of the month, I'm doing well.
Right? I know it is like 4 degrees here, so it is freezing.
Yeah.
But we're here. We made it somehow, some way. Thank the Lord, right?
Yes. Yes. All right.
All right, so we'll
Okay.
jump right into it. All right, so all your fans want to know, how did you become interested in counseling?
I became interested in counseling. I have a degree in psychology, and it was my focus was industrial psychology. So when I graduated, I went into business. But over the years, to make a long story short, I became more interested in helping the community around mental health issues as opposed to industrial psychology. So uh, I worked in business for a while and then just said, well, I'll take the plunge, take the salary cut, and go into social services. And so that's how I became interested in it and made the transition. It was more a matter of time and then wanting to help my people from not so much a business perspective, but mental health and the emotional health of my community.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, bless you for taking that pay cut, right? A lot of people
Yeah.
wouldn't do that.
Yeah. I went to the secretary after I got my first check and said, I think it must be a mistake. I work full time, not part time. And she said, no, that's what you make.
Oh, no, you'll definitely see that when you transfer to the social services.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah. And that was back in 1990.
Oh,
So,
wow. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. All right, don't
Mhm.
worry. I won't date you or anything like that. But
Okay.
I was born in 89.
Okay.
So,
We were in two different places in 1989, that's for sure.
mhm.
Okay.
All right.
All
So,
right.
where did you go to school for your undergrad and your graduate and postgraduate degrees?
Okay. I went to Loyola for undergrad and graduated with a degree in psychology, as I said. And then later, I went to Northeastern Illinois and got a degree in community counseling. And then worked for a number of years, kind of climbed the ladder. And then I went and got a doctorate degree in uh, counseling psychology from the Illinois school at Argosy University in Chicago,
Mhm.
and finished my doctorate back in 2011.
All right. Nice. Congratulations.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah,
So, I know you mentioned that you were doing therapy in between your master's and your doctorate. So,
absolutely.
how long have you been doing therapy for?
Well, I got my first counseling job in 1993 or 94. And so it's 30 years this year. And and then I was licensed in 1996 and as an LCPC. So I've been licensed as a clinical professional counselor since then. And back then, the license was new in the early 90s, and glad it happened. It allowed me to do some other things too, such as third party reimbursement and establish a private practice for a number of years with other therapists. And my wife, Kathy, and I, we've been in practice together. But I've also done a lot of other things. LCPC allowed me to also supervise other therapists and other programs, be a department director. And now I work as a clinical director here at Chicago Torture Justice Center. So it allowed me an administrative path and a private practice clinical path as well, and everything in between. So I've done a lot in the field over the last 30 years, the past 30 years, in different capacities, but it's all been mental health related from a community focus. And then private practice, of course, I worked a lot. You kind of transition over the years from doing more family work to doing more couples work. And so last 15 years is I've spent a lot of time doing couples counseling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I know we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording. So hopefully this
Sure.
is some of the stuff that you can remember, right? So what places did you work at starting off in your profession, and what did you learn as a result working at those places?
Well, Catholic Charities was where I started my career, and kind of developed a focus there. There, you worked with a lot of social workers, MSWs, and some LCPCs. Again, the license was new, so I worked with Catholic Charities in the field of child welfare. And child welfare, it has a huge political component because it's court involved. You're working with trauma constantly, and the trauma is induced through the African American experience with the community and how the community impacts African Americans. So I would say that organization and that industry, child welfare, gave me my orientation to the field. So I interact with schools a lot. I interact with churches. You interact with the court system quite a bit, and you're testifying in cases, and then you're working with the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. So you're working with a government entity as well. So you kind of see the Black experience, how our resources are allocated in our community or how they're not allocated. And then my own personal life experience. I grew up in Inglewood in Chicago. I moved there back in the late 50s and saw the transition as more and more Blacks migrated from the South. You could see the disinvestment and how that impacted Black families and Black mental health. Then you saw the rise of gangs, these kind of things, and how a lot of the other factors that influence Black families, like redlining and all kind of policies, created poverty and discrimination, which ultimately led to desperation, the emergence of gangs, drugs, these kinds of things, homelessness, decrepit housing, and a lack of overall investment by the city, by government, and the role various institutions have, like police, real estate, banks, education, court system. You saw how all of that impacted the Black community. So it's been quite an education for me over the years. And then towards the end of my career, when I got my doctorate, and as I was getting my doctorate, got a chance to teach counseling for quite a period of time, from 2004 until 2017. So that was a good experience as well, being able to formulate counseling practice into teaching it to other people, other practitioners and future practitioners. So all of that kind of gave me a really good conceptual framework of counseling, how Black folk develop, and all kind of other things that's, not enough time to talk about, but that's how I got my start, and that's how I developed over time. Yeah.
All right, definitely. A lot of great
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, so I know we were talking about this also before we started recording also, but I mean, true, this shouldn't just be asked just because it's February, but we really need to really take a look at the Black experience while being a counselor here in the counseling field. So what was your experience as a Black American starting in the counseling field, and what is it currently as well?
Wow. Well, when I started in the field, I was a case manager, started there, and I attended graduate school in the evening. So I worked during the day, went to school at night, and had another part-time job doing counseling as well, carrying a pager to do crisis intervention, and so I was always very, very busy. So over time, uh, I learned a lot about just how this city interacts with young Black people. And I would tend to get those cases, the cases that would be the runaway, the case that would be the young Black man who is now in foster care or relative family care and giving grandma a hard time, or a foster parent who's not related a hard time. I would get those cases. And those are cases people tended not to want because they're very difficult to work. So through that, it kind of gave me a protocol, a counseling protocol of doing more family work than individual work. So what I would try to do is to involve fathers, uncles, grandfathers, as I work with young Black men. And then those cases kind of helped me to utilize genograms, family systems, and that became my focus. Even when I work with individuals, that became my focus as a young therapist. And it kind of stayed with me even now. Over time, I started my own practice, as I said, and then I'd see families and approach it in a very similar way. They were families who were a little higher on the socioeconomic scale, but they tended to be African American, about at least 95, 99%. And so, I realized the importance of the ancestry as we did counseling. I realized early on the importance of intergenerational trauma, and trauma going all the way back to the previous century. Back then, it was the Reconstruction and the Black codes and all those things as part of doing the therapy, understanding how those things affected families, the rules, how people expressed emotion or didn't, how people coped, what made them resilient, and these kind of factors as I work with Black families. So those are my early experiences, but they kind of laid the foundation of how I approached therapy later on in private practice. And even here where I work now at Chicago Torture Justice Center, these are men who have been tortured by police and have spent, and in many cases, been exonerated. But you see the impact of police violence, especially back during the days of, I don't know if your audience have heard of John Burge, but if they were to look up John Burge, they would see a long history of electrocutions, suffocations, beating with phone books so that they didn't leave marks on the victims. And John Burge, how do I say this? When he came, he grew up in Chicago as well as a Vietnam vet. His job was to extract information from the POWs. And he brought those same tactics to Black men on the south side of Chicago. And so I ended up working and still do with those men who experienced that kind of abuse. And of course, my early training helped me to understand how these things are allowed to happen. The institutions that allow men to go through those experiences, the court system, which doesn't really give ear to it, the political system, which allows it to happen, and all of these things. So again, understanding how systems work. It's not just family systems, but it's the systems that people live in their own communities, and that formulated my approach to counseling early on, and still does today, and even how I do supervision. I tend to approach supervision with therapists from their grasp of how systems impact their clients and culture impact their clients, and what does culture truly mean? Because a lot of us taking courses in multicultural counseling without ever really looking at political systems and the impact of racism, the impact of government policies from the GI Bill to redlining, and how that impact where people live, what businesses they have access to, how their schools are funded, and all of these things. And so where I am right now, my early training sort of prepared me for this work as a clinical director with the Chicago Torture Justice Center, because we utilize a model called politicized healing, where it's not just doing psychotherapy, it's also working with community organizers and other folk who help develop more resiliency and empower clients in the community to look at the systems of harm and then to dismantle those systems of harm, rather than looking at themselves as dysfunctional, understanding the systems they live in are dysfunctional, and then how to change them. And that at this point in my career, it's been a 30+ year career now. That's where I am, and I'm sure that's how I'm going to finish it as well. You know, yeah. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely did. Right, and I
Okay.
appreciate that. All right.
Sure.
And true, based off of your answer, there are more questions now that I want to ask. So we'll definitely have to come back and do a part two for this one.
Absolutely. Okay.
But also, I want to get your experiences because I know you mentioned, right now you're the clinical director at the Chicago Torture Justice Center. And then also, I believe you're either the clinical director or the clinical trainer at Argosy University, right?
Right. I was. I'm no longer until 2017.
Oh,
That's when I
okay.
left and came here. 2018. This is where I made my home.
All right. So speaking of that, you also, I know, along with your wife, have a private practice as well.
Yep.
All right. So then, what was the process that led you to wanting to start a private practice?
As I worked in child welfare, and became a systems therapist, I would look at the industry of child welfare,
Mhm.
and the focus was protecting children, not developing families to protect children. And so my wife and I, we started Family Counseling Institute with another person. And then over time, another therapist, LCPC from Northeastern Illinois University. And so we hired, we had, I think it was 6 full-time people, and then administrative staff as well. And we started working, rather than just working with child welfare clients, our focus then became much broader, and we wanted to work with middle-class people, which are the majority of Black people, are middle-class people.
Mhm.
And so that's how we transitioned. Kathy and I, she has a master's in social work from University of Chicago, and she's an LCSW. And so we started working then in the Family Counseling Institute. And Family Counseling Institute from 1996 until 2015,
Mhm.
that we operated Family Counseling Institute for 19 years or 20 years. And we started working then with corporations to do employee assistance programs. What else? Did a lot of training for the community. We do marriage workshops from an African American perspective, parenting, effective Black parenting. And so the private practice gave me an opportunity then to work with Black folk, but who had different life experiences, and mainly in corporate America.
Mhm.
And then again, I continued though to be a director in other programs like Central Baptist. It's called Central Baptist now. It's called One Hope United,
Okay.
and different organizations like Aunt Martha's. And so those are 2 organizations that I could think of that I continue to work in, and of course Catholic charities as well, as I maintained a private practice, as I got my doctorate, and
Right.
all of that is, and being a father, because we have 4 kids and 13 grandkids. So it's pretty full life, I think, as a Black man working in the field of mental health. There's so many opportunities, because we're working with a system that creates harm. And so there's always opportunities for healers if they want to do the work, you know?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay.
So speaking of healing, one of the things that a lot of clinicians don't like to do is cross streams, right? And one of the things that clinicians really don't like to cross streams with is faith. And I
Mm,
noticed, right, on your private practice website, you do a lot of faith-based counseling as well. So how
yeah.
has faith played a part in your private practice?
Uh, I think about faith and the role of church in the Black community. And for me, it's hard to see how do you not use faith in your private practice? Uh, because faith has been what liberated Black folk from slavery, what started public school education, what gave us historically Black universities, colleges and universities. So faith, what we found as you look at systems work, using the genogram and Bowen's theory, uh, faith is what helped folk to be resilient. And many of the previous generations were held together by the cohesion of faith. Faith kept communities together. And as Black folk migrated from Tuvalu and Macon, Georgia, and all these other places, faith is what gave them community when they got to Chicago and where I practice. And so not having a grasp of that, not approaching the work in that way, to me, would be removing a lot of the cultural experiences of Black folk and what made them resilient and the events that they had that brought families together. So I had to understand faith, and faith had much more of an activism role earlier in Black life. So faith is what I think the church has kind of got away from that, but the church used to be much more involved in the political activity of Black folks. Everything from the Civil Rights Bill to voting rights to even going back to 40 acres and a mule. When they got together to make that policy, which they never honored, it was the church that the general negotiated with, 20 Black pastors. So my understanding is that faith is so much, and it is what got people through the intense harassment and the danger that they've always lived in. Faith was always a big part of that. So most of my clients, that's the language that they speak, and that's the language that they knew when they were children and when they went through their various stages of psychological development. And so faith has always been a huge part of my practice. And so without faith, I would not understand a lot of my clients' self-image, how they operated in their community, and what made them resilient as people. And to remove that would be not to truly understand where a lot of folk get their hope, their resilience, and what helped them then to deal with the adverse situations as they dealt with the communities where I'm from. I'm from Inglewood. Faith was a big part of that. And if you could see Inglewood in, say, 1968 versus Inglewood in 1998, 30-year difference, you're looking at two different worlds. And removing faith, I can't say that that's why it's changed so much, but I can say that they no longer draw upon as a whole the faith that they had, that their ancestors practiced in order to cope with discrimination, community violence, political violence, violence from law enforcement, and then the courts, and all the adverse situations that they dealt with as a community. Yeah. So faith is still operates in the community. So many programs, and you still have a few pastors out there who do work as activists. And you think about Saint Sabina and the work that they do there, and other pastors. It's harder for me to name them now because there are many fewer of them. Jesse Jackson, for instance, and so many other leaders. Martin Luther King. Those are all people of faith, and they always were very active in the community. And so, faith as a therapist was very important to understand and explained what made people resilient and where they got their hope from. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
No, that was great. Don't know how I'm going to transition to the next question from that. Right.
These are great questions too, man. Yeah, they get at the heart of their profession for a Black person. I can't say it'd be the same for any other people, but for a Black man, the questions you're giving, I think, go right to the heart of what makes a therapist in under these circumstances. Yeah.
Right. Right. And speaking of that too, as you mentioned, you were pretty busy, but even on top of that, you still had time to get involved professionally. So you are a past president of IACFC, which is the Illinois Association for Couples and Family Counseling. So what led you to decide to run for president of that organization?
Wow, that's a great question as well. I live in Chicago, that's in northern Illinois, and it's a statewide organization. And so when I thought about, and I had been a member of ICA, Illinois Counseling Association, since 1990, 1991. Yeah. And so by the time the 2000s came, I said, well, I want us to have a greater presence in Cook County and in Chicago, and to do more workshops and those kinds of things here. And so I decided, well, let me throw my hat in the ring. And Lord and behold, it just happened to work out that way, that we need more folks to step up, but not a whole lot of folks are stepping up to want to be president, I think. And I wanted to try to put the African American experience more in the limelight. Some things happened. COVID, that was a big one. That happened, and that changed. I mean, we scrambled and scrambled, and so. But I always thought that being involved politically also meant being involved in whatever trade you're in, the associations associated with that trade, And so for us as counselors, that's ICA, because they deal with a lot of the political issues, and they were central in getting third-party reimbursement at a time when I couldn't get third-party reimbursement as a LCPC, right. Back in the early 90s and mid 90s. So having a strong turnout was important, and strong affiliation with the IACFC or Illinois Mental Health Counselors Association, whatever it might be. It's really important that we advocate that way. And what I'm learning, especially at Chicago Torture Justice Center, organizing is key. The more people you have, the more they talk to politicians, the more they talk to insurance companies, the more they can reflect the will of the people, or in other words, our clientele, what their issues are, because when I started family therapy, often they wouldn't even pay for it, Oh. And, the emphasis on diagnosing and not mental health. It was more so on mental illness, not mental health. And so ICA did a lot to keep challenging those beliefs. And we still have a long way to go. Parity between psychologists, social workers, and counselors. Medicaid. All of these issues were really important political issues. So IACFC, ICA, and all the different organizations, you have to speak to the combination of their beliefs and their ability to carry out those beliefs. That's what politics is. And ICA is a political organization. IACFC is a political organization. IMHCA, all of that those are all political. That's how I see it. It's political organizations letting the people, this developing political power, where we live, operate, and how we carry out our profession. Yeah. So you have to be involved. I don't see how you can be a therapist and not involved. But I see therapists who are not involved.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
All right.
So
right. So before we get to our final questions, I
Sure.
just want to touch a little bit on your presidency as president of the IACFC. So what were some things that you're most proud of, and what are some things that you wish you had more time to work on as president?
Bringing folks together, we were able to do a workshop. And I think Nicole Thompson, Dr. Thompson, Nicole Thompson, she took the mantle from me, and she's doing some of the things I wish I had more time to work on and had done. A conference, for instance, they're setting up a conference now, and then having it located here in Chicago, addressing issues around culture. I tried to get those issues, those things brought up with the board that I had. But like I said, COVID just kind of came out of nowhere. And my advice to anyone is don't do three things at one time. Hold just your full-time job. And then if you're going to be president, just do that. Don't do anything else.
Right.
So I think that being more focused on what are the needs of the people, a survey to people that you're leading, to the organization rather that you're leading. What do the people want? What do they need? What kind of training do they want? What do they need to know more about? Because we live in a changing world right now, and counselors have done well to keep up. And COVID, in some ways, has helped our profession to be more recognized and to get more resources. So I think, when you have lightning in a bottle, you have to capture. You have to hold on to it. So right now we're positioned at a place where we can let more people know what we do, to find out what they want, and then to organize that into some kind of format that could help us to address the issues. We just had the Tyree Nichols case?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We have to be at the forefront of these issues. We live in a changing world. And if we're talking about changing the environment, how cities spend their budgets, all of these things, how children are interrogated, for instance, by police, issues in schools, all of these things, counselors should be at the forefront of doing this kind of work, and their organizations should be speaking to. We should have political action committees. Who do we endorse? These kinds of things. And so, I'm involved with IACFC, IACFC, but I'm also involved with social workers as well, because my wife's a social worker, so she drafted me, and I still. Right. So I do work between both organizations, but as a profession, our organizations really, I hope, would just gain more political power. And when I say that, I mean just having delegations to talk to churches, to talk to labor unions, to talk to politicians, state senators, these kinds of things. And then have events to host them, even just sit down and break bread. That's important. And then work with other organizations like the NASW, APA, about mental health and what can we be doing as a whole to address certain issues. When I started out, when there were calls of domestic violence to the police department, if a woman didn't press charges, they can let the perpetrator go. But through the work of mental health providers, police can now press charges against someone because often the victim is too afraid to do it. So, we make a difference politically, and we have to keep doing those things. There are a plethora of other issues that we need to start addressing for the next generation. That's how I see it. And, now it's a great time, especially for Black counselors, but for white counselors too, because I work with a diverse group here. And I have a lot of white folks that I work with who advocate against white supremacy and the policies and these issues. So, and it's always been like that in this country. The abolitionists, many of them were white, so it takes a coalition, a rainbow coalition of young people speaking their mind, but they need a place to organize. And that's what I think we have to do. And that's what I wish I could have done more and hope that we continue to do. Is just sit down, organize, and learn from other people, even those outside of our profession, about how to do these things. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, definitely. So as we get down to our final two questions, because of course, all good things must come to an end.
Absolutely.
All right.
I got another meeting too. Shoot. So
right.
Okay.
All right. So second to last question before we get to the most important question. So is there anything you would like to tell people starting out in the field or who have been in the field for a while?
Yes, diversity of experiences. It's good to be very good at what you do. It's good to focus on one particular area, but often when you do other things, it makes your focus a little bit different. It adds to the richness and your knowledge base. So I would say private practice is important. If you're working as in child welfare or whatever it is that you do, starting a private practice, I would not have gotten the experience that I've gotten if I had never started a private practice. So I would say a diversity of experience. And then get together with other people in your field. And by the way, I'm seeking a therapist right now. We need a therapist here at the Chicago Torture Justice Center. We're down one person. So if anybody's looking to apply, please let me know. And I would say listening to other people outside of your field. Go to workshops that are in your local community whenever they're having community organizers come together. Right. And you'll learn more about the people that you're working with, and whatever your concentration is, look to diversify your understanding of it, not just in one way. Yeah. So I'm a systems theorist, but I integrate a lot of different things. Yeah. And so the more you can do that, the better. The better.
Perfect.
And take care of yourself physically.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Take care of your mental health.
All right. So now for the most important question, right? Drum roll. Where can people find or contact you?
Oh, just Nate, N-A-T-E, at chicagotorturejustice.org. So that's Nate, that's my email. Nate, N-A-T-E, at chicagotorturejustice.org. Or you can just email my name, Nathaniel Gilham at gmail.com. That's how folks get in touch with me. And or you can come by and see the center, see some of the artwork. We're trying to, we have all kind of programs here that we're developing. We've only been in existence since 2018. So it's a very young organization. If you're looking to learn more about this population or the history of the city, if you work in Chicago, come by and we can always talk. Bring coffee, whatever you do. Yeah.
All right, perfect. All right, well, I know we wrapped up 4 minutes to one, so that was perfect. But then again, thank you again, Dr. Gilham, for talking with me and doing this interview. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And be blessed.
Hmm. All right, so we'll definitely have to come back and do a part two. But
Okay.
all right, perfect. So we got you
All
down for
right.
another one. All right,
All right.
everybody. That is it for this interview. Thank you very much. My name is Coresair Mack, again, president of the Illinois Mental Health Counselors Association, signing out. And I'll see you in the next interview. Take care.
All right.